Hello, and welcome to the first in our series of tutorials where we will create together a needlebook very similar to this one. As promised, I want to address any questions that you've asked in the comments section of previous videos that pertain to today's topic, as we'll work through it so that everyone can benefit from the answers. What's today's topic? Understanding your needle inventory. It's not very sexy, I know, but it only makes sense to start here because you'll need to do some planning as to how many pages you'll want in your needlebook before you begin and how you'll label them. So it's kind of the foundation for the project. This video will act as a reference for those of you also who need a little background, and I did receive many questions and comments about the needles themselves from the tour video, which I'll link up here. So stay tuned for a bit of a deep dive. I also want to state up front that I am not an expert on hand sewing needles, far from it really. There are many folks out there who know so much more. I will share with you what I know as it relates to our needlebook project, and if you really want to geek out on the topic, Google is your friend. Additionally, I'll also place some reference materials in the description box below this video for you. That all being said, don't let the intricacies of needle identification frustrate you or slow you down at all in any way. In the end, it's all about enjoying our hand sewing and creating. Getting ourselves organized will go a long way toward that, and this or any needlebook will be part of our organization. Let's dive in. First off, what needles do you have? I was fortunate to know what types of needles I had and their sizes when I designed my book, because I kept all my needles in their, their original packages. And for the most part, I put them back when I was done. So I had a good foundation to jump off from. But I realized as I was thinking about teaching you all how I made this, that it may not be the case that you still have your original packaging. So what can be done if you don't know what you have? That's a bit tricky, so let me explain. There are no hard and fast universal standards for needles. Similar to how the sizing of women's clothing works, at least here in the US, each brand and maker seems to have their own sizing standards. A size 18 chenille, let's see. Yeah, I think I have a size 18 chenille here. Chenille needle. And one of these that's manufactured by John James will not be identical to a size 18 chenille manufactured by Bowen or some other brand, for example. There are, yes, certain characteristics that are similar between all chenilles, a larger eye, and a wider relative shaft, for example, but there will be variations on those properties between the brands, as well as the length of the needle in total. That can vary as well, and often does. I wish there were universal standards. You know, when you're a knitter, you're spoiled, because if you have a needle and or a crocheter for that matter, you have a needle, you don't know what size it is, you can take your gauge, you go down the holes until you find the last possible one that you can't get through the 2. So this is a 3, or in millimeters it's a 3 1/4. So if it were a crochet hook, it would be a size D, and that's nice. But that's not possible with hand sewing needles. So if you happen to know the brand of needle, maybe, but not the type, and when I say type in this video, I'm referring to chenille, milliner, beading, crewel, bullion, tapestry, weaving, those types of needles. That's what I mean by type, excuse me. But yeah, if you happen to know the manufacturer, like, oh, I only buy John James needles, well, that would be great, because you could go to their website, and in particular John James, but it's possibly true of other manufacturers, they have a needles guide And if you print it out on 8.5 by 11 paper, that is to say A4, it will be true to size, and you can actually place your needles against the image and determine what you've got in your hand there. But that's, I think that's a pretty rare occurrence. And oftentimes, hey, if you've got needles you can't identify, you probably don't know the brand either, so that it may offer limited help for you. But I will link the John James Needle Guide in the description below, as well as some other references, but you'll find that link if you are interested in looking at it. There's other useful information in the guide as well. So what does not being able to identify your needles mean for this project? Well, if you have unidentified or unpackaged needles, and given there are no universal ways to identify exactly what they are, how will you proceed with this needlebook project, given that each page is dedicated to a needle type? Probably you all will fall into a couple categories of creators in this project. You can build pages for all the needles you feel you're likely to use based on the projects you like to do and materials you prefer. And I'll talk about how needle types relate to specific projects and specific fabrics and specific threads shortly. But for now, well, and I have created a chart also. I'm not sure how I'll be able to get that to you. I don't know if I can attach a document in the description box below, but I will attempt that. And if not, I'll be showing that chart that I created on screen, and you can take a screenshot or come back to the video and refer to it as many times as you need. And I think that will be very helpful for you to kind of relate your needles to your projects. But once you have a list of the needles you'd like to own, you then would include a few blank pages at the end of your book, like I've done here. It's on this side. Here's a blank page at the end of my book. And that's where you keep your current set of anonymous needles, we'll call them. These are the needles that you have currently, that you love to use, that you don't necessarily know what they are, but they're your favorites. And then over time, as you want to try out and become familiar with new needles, you can purchase them, and you'll have a little home for them in your book. So again, as you purchase new needles over time that you want to try out and become familiar with, you'll know their type and have a page for them to call home if you plan for them in this stage. Only your legacy needles will live here on your blank page. These are the ones that you can't identify, but you know that you like to use, and they'll generally be retired over time as they wear or get lost. So your needle book, if you go for this option, will have many labeled pages, most likely, without many, if any, needles in them. And then your blank page will have all your needles that you're currently using. And then over time, they will migrate and fill out your book. We might call this group the legacy group. There'll be another set of you who perhaps are just starting out, and so you need to build an inventory of needles. You may choose to buy a sampling of many varied types. And thankfully, needles are not expensive items and are relatively easy to find at your local stitching shop or online. This group of folks would make pages based on what you've purchased and therefore can identify. And just like the folks in option 1, the legacy group, you'd also include a few blank pages unlabeled at the back that you would have kind of as room to grow, where you're planning that further down the road you may need a greater variety of needles than what you plan for at this stage. So an option 2 book would look the opposite. There would be more needles on the labeled pages and only a few, if any, on the blank page back here. So that's how we can address if you are uncertain of what needles you have and you either do or do not wish to go out and get more, or fill in the blanks of your needlebook right away, or you do. You have the option either way. Option 2 will look more like this book, where needles will be on the labeled pages, and then there'll be few, if any, on the unlabeled page, because you just purchased the needles and you know what they are. Or like me, you didn't go out and buy them, but you've had a lot of packages, so that's how you knew what they were. We'll call this group the newbie group. But please do understand that I'm not advocating that you have to go out and buy needles if you don't want to or are unable. Option 1, having a blank page for the unidentified needles you have now and are using, will serve you just fine. You can populate your labeled pages over time as you see fit. So we've got our legacy group, we've got our newbie group, and then I think there's possibly, although maybe it's unlikely, there's possibly another group of folks out there who perhaps don't care about the needle type at all and just want a few unlabeled pages in your book to store your needles. You've either grouped by their general characteristics or some other criteria, and you don't plan to label them. Or maybe you don't care about the needle type, but you do want to label your pages based on your own naming conventions. My hunch is that folks who've shown an interest in this particular needle book are also interested in designated needle types, so perhaps there won't be many who fall into this third category, but if yes, that works too. This third group we'll call the rogue group, and I'll proceed with the tutorial assuming you're interested in knowing needle types, since it's the book that has spurred all the requests for tutorials, this particular one, and it's specific to needle type. Just know that you're free to approach this project many different ways if you choose. I hope that's clear. All right, onward. Given all that, you need to decide and list all the needle types that you'll be creating pages for, whether you have them now or plan to be getting them in the future. The needles you list, plus 1 or 2 blank pages, represent the number of pages you'll be buying supplies for, and the pages that you'll be making labels for. Of course, you know, all these labels are stitched, and we'll go into that process and printing things out on fabric and stitching over them in a later tutorial. But yeah, as you can see, knowing what you've got and planning is key to this project. So it's a little upfront work. I want to give you a few tidbits on your planning stage here. You may want a page or two for pins, as I have here. These applique pins that I have, I use these a lot, so I have a page just for them. And just some general purpose pins with great big old heads that are easy to use. So think about that. It's up to you if you want pin pages. You may want a second page for a designated needle type that you really love. Like I love milliners. So I have a page for milliners, and I made an identical color page on the back that has the other sizes. There are many sizes to milliners. I love milliners because I'm currently obsessed with a project that I created I created a structured tank top for my daughter, and it's made out of jersey knit fabric, and milliners are great. They just slide right through jersey knit. So I created this tank top for her, and it's in the style of a woman designer. Her name is Natalie Channon. She has a number of books and a design studio down in Florence, Alabama. This is one of her 4 or 5 books. It's just has some lovely ideas in it, and I love her work, and I do a lot of that. As you'll see, I like a lot of texture and a lot of color. This is navy and kind of a rusty orange, I'd say, with some metallic paint that I stenciled on. Anyways, this is reverse applique, hence I have a lot of applique needles and a lot of milliners needles to get through all this jersey knit, cotton jersey knit. I'll be incidentally doing a video on some of this reverse applique work that I've been doing that's based on what Alabama Shannon has, her studio has been putting out for a few decades now. It's a side note. Let's see. Also, note that if things change down the road and you wish you had more pages in your needle book than you decided here in this planning phase, you can always undo the binding stitch here at the end and add some more pages. Wouldn't be fun, but it's definitely doable. So try to get this inventory, this needle inventory right, but don't sweat it if things change or you miss something. Well, everything's fixable. Okay, onward now. I'll put a list of the main needle types in this video's description box below this video under more that you can pick and choose from if you are stuck on where to begin. But what exactly are these needles meant for? So many of you were surprised by the number of needle types that exist. I don't have them all in this book either. There are more, but these are the main hand sewing needles, and I'd like to give a brief overview of what they are and for what types of needlework and materials they're best designed. And to do that, let's look again at the anatomy of a needle and go over the basics of sizing and etc. So that when I describe each of them, we're all on the same page. You may notice that, we have milliners, for example, here, and we've got a milliner 7, a 9, a 10, an 11. These numbers are generally what we're referring to when we talk about size. And let's talk about what these numbers represent. First of all, the sizes refer to the diameter of the needle's shaft, and it runs counter to what you'd expect. The higher the number, the finer or smaller that needle shaft is. And here's why that's true. To make a needle, the manufacturer draws or stretches a steel or other wire to a desired thickness or diameter. That sizing number represents the number of times the metal wire was stretched. So this size 18 chenille needle that we were looking at earlier was pulled 18 times to achieve this diameter. Now, if we look at a size 24 chenille, here, let's put that next to the 8. Here's the 18. Here's the 24. This 24 chenille was pulled an additional 6 times to result in this finer diameter of shaft. So a 24 is smaller than an 18. And that's why you see that converse relationship with the number. I may as well talk about this. The reason that a chenille 18 by one manufacturer isn't comparable to an 18 by another necessarily is because they start out with different diameter wires when they begin their pulling process. So that's where the non-standard sizing comes into play. They begin with apples and oranges. So that's the background there. And aside from the differing diameters of wires they use to start out with, the manufacturer, once they've pulled this, let's say this needle 18 times, this chenille, they then will cut it to a certain length. And manufacturers will cut their 18s at varied lengths. So again, now the length won't be standard either, not just the diameter, but the length. Additionally, then also the eye itself. Different manufacturers have different, basically, dies that they use to punch those eyes, and they vary. And some Some are easier to thread, some are accommodate thicker threads. So you get a feel over time for manufacturers you enjoy working with. But that's some of the reasoning behind the wild variations between manufacturers, and the fact that I can't just tell you, oh, this length, this diameter, that's a chenille 18. So there you go. After wire is stretched, it is cut to length and the eye is punched out. They will sharpen the point to varying degrees. And that is essentially the manufacturing process of a needle. It's pretty high level. That's the best I can do for you. Hope that is enlightening. One of the key things you think about in terms of needle type when you're thinking relative to the project you're working on is how that shaft is shaped. Let's put it that way. Some needles, their shaft will, like with the milliners, be very straight. And they don't increase much, if at all, at the eye itself. So you see it's a pretty uniform straight shape. The eye is quite small, and so it can glide through some light to medium woven fabrics like the cotton jersey that I talked about earlier. Slides right through there. It doesn't have to accommodate the widening eye at the end, whereas a chenille, you'll see the shaft starts out quite thick and it's quite straight, and then it bumps out to accommodate a very large eye, which is there to accommodate very large threads, yarns, linens perhaps, wool, that sort of thing. So you give some consideration to, and they differentiate between needles based on how that eye behaves or what the shaft does when it reaches the eye. Whether it bulges or is straight, and whether the shaft itself tapers when it comes to the point, or is it uniformly thin all the way up and doesn't widen at the top. So it can widen and bulge to accommodate a large eye, or it can be relatively straight and narrow all the way up. And that plays into where you want, what fabrics you'll be using those needles in. So let's talk a bit about that. I promised I would, and here we go. So milliners needles, their eyes are small to medium. You see how they're pretty tiny. They tend to be long. They have a sharp point. Not all needles have sharp points, by the way. We'll talk about that. And they're best for things like millinery, hat making. They're good for pleating, decorative stitching. They accommodate threads in the cotton, silk, poly realm, and they are used often with light and medium woven fabric. Sashiko needles, their eyes tend to be small to medium based relative to that needle width overall, and they have a sharp point. They are primarily made for decorative reinforcement. This is sashiko stitching here on the front cover, and it lends some durability to the front and back cover of this book. So it's good for decorative reinforcement. And there are special threads that you can do your sashiko with. They're cotton, and they're thicker. I think they're around a 3 if you are familiar with thread sizes. But you can use DMC, in a bind. I'm not one to totally follow the rules. And this is sashiko thread that I have here on this cover, but I've used DMC thread and various yarns and things even for certain sashiko designs that I've created. So there's some wiggle room always in everything. I mean, we're artists, right? We're creating. bullion needles. These are great for decorative stitching, decorative needlework. You tend to use floss or DMC and work with them in firm woven fabrics and wools, that sort of thing. Embroidery needles, they tend to be long. They have a medium kind of diameter shaft and sharp points. They're great for fine needlework and surface embroidery. You tend to use floss or DMC, silks in terms of threads, and linen, cotton, and even weave fabrics are kind of where these shine. Darners, they're long. They have a medium diameter, long shaft, long eye. They tend to be blunt versus sharp, but there are sharp darners, and they're for darning. They're for mending, using cotton and wool, and great in knits and woven fabrics. So that's where you'd use a darner. Sharps are our general purpose needles. This is what we come to do our mending, to sew on a button, to hem a pair of pants. Sharps have a small eye. They're thin, they're short, they've got a sharp point. They do all the general mending. You tend to use cotton and poly threads, and they are great in most woven fabrics. Huck needles, they're a bit of a specialty. They're large. They have a large eye. They're a long needle. They've got a blunt tip, and they're used in a woven embroidery, a certain type of woven embroidery, a Swedish woven embroidery, kind of a geometric weaving, traditionally type of embroidery. They're using cotton floss, and the fabric is called a huck toweling fabric. So that's a bit of a specialty guy. It's pins. Let's see, more milliners, my babies. Here we have our chenilles. We've talked a lot about these tonight. They have a large eye. They have a thick diameter. Their lengths, they can be short and long. Chenilles, sharp point. They're great for heavier, coarser fabrics, and they do decorative work. You'd use with them, and the eye is really indicative of this, would be things like ribbon, wool, yarns, some pearl, cotton, metal threads, and they work great in medium to heavy woven fabrics. So that's a chenille. Crewels, I don't know where my crewels are right now. I set them aside for a project, and I have to go down to my project bag and pull them out at some point. But crewels have a medium to large eye, and they're medium length, and they have a sharp point. They're for cross stitch, fine needlework. You use wool yarns with them because they have that medium to large eye, and they're great in linen and twill, that sort of thing. Oh, these beading needles are amazing. Let me show you something neat about this beading needle. So here's a long, lovely beading needle. So beading needles, you're having to slip the beads, thread the beads with the needle. So they tend to be quite fine in terms of their diameter. Not only that, but their eyes are amazing. Look at the eye on this needle. Let me open it up for you. You can actually open it up like this, and that's how so it's lovely to work with, and they're just so fine and delicate. So that's a beading needle, and I think it's obvious what these are for. They're for beading. Sequins, beads, pearls, so decorative work, and they're pretty delicate. Get this guy in here, and they tend to be curved because you're doing all sorts of getting into all sorts of nooks and crannies with those. Weaving needles are pretty self-explanatory. Big eyes, blunt tips, varied shapes. They're for weaving. I think enough said there. Tapestry needles, they have large eyes. They have about a medium diameter relatively. They tend to be short to medium in length, and they have a blunt tip. They do cross stitch needlepoint. That's kind of what they're made for, with wool and cotton thread, and done on canvas and even weave type fabrics. And that's kind of the rundown of what I have here. I also, there are other needles, upholstery needles, which I also have in a separate package. I don't have a page for them, so I either will take the seam out and make this upholstery, put my upholstery needles here and add another blank page, or not. I'm going to decide on that. But upholstery needles, of course, they've got small to medium eyes, but they are quite thick in diameter and long and sharp. And sometimes their points are not just sharp, but they're triangular, and they're for furniture making and heavy materials. So they go through leather and heavy canvas, and you'd use upholstery thread, nylon, that sort of thing. So they do a very tough work, and they're very strong, sturdy needles. Basting needles tend to be sharps, but just longer basting needles. And I did have a sweet comment from someone in Surrey, England. And yeah, they tend to be another type of needle, just made longer, and they're great utility needles. They tend to be extra long, with sharp tips. They're for temporary stitching, but they're also for decorative stitching. You can really load that needle, like similar to a sashiko needle. You can put many stitches on one pass through. You tend to use cotton, and they're great for all fabrics because basically they're a giant sharp. And then quilting needles are a tiny sharp. I mean, well, yeah, I guess I would call them sharps, but they're tiny needles. They are built for speed, and they're lovely little needles. They're small in terms of their eye size. They're thin. They're short, as I said. They have a sharp point. They're for quilting. You're using cotton thread on quilting cotton, and you can really get a precise, fast job done with these little quilting needles. And so I have all of that written, and I'm going to go ahead and place that in front of you now on this screen. But I thought it might be nice for you to see the needle as I spoke about it. But here is the breakdown of those needles. I'll zoom in, and you are certainly welcome to take a screenshot. And as I said, I will also try and load this up in the description area, but if I can't, you'll need to come and take a screenshot or refer back to this particular section, and I'll put a bookmark in the video flow so that you can go right to it if you need to. Okay, so I think we've covered most of our topics, and I really want you to give some thoughts to either what needles you have or what needles you'd like to have. Make a list. Have that ready. If you have a favorite font that you like, maybe in Word or what have you, I like Comic Sans or Calibri or what have you, or Times New Roman. I'm a Times New Roman gal. Have a font in mind. Have your needle list in hand. And when we get together next, we're going to talk nitty-gritty details about the materials you're going to need. So look forward to that. And I thank you for your patience in getting this out to you. And I look forward to progressing on this little project and making a beautiful little needle book for you too. All right, see you next time. Thank you.